We begin this edition of Big Ten Today with still developing news from Michigan, where now former Wolverines head football coach Sherrone was taken into custody Wednesday night as part of a Pittsfield Township police investigation. Moore had been terminated with cause earlier in the day Wednesday, as a university investigation found that Moore had engaged in inappropriate conduct with another staff member. A statement released by Athletic Director Ward Manuel reads in part, quote, "This conduct constitutes a clear violation of university policy, and UM maintains zero tolerance for such behavior." Moore had been a member of Michigan's coaching staff since 2018, advancing from tight ends coach to offensive line coach and eventually offensive coordinator. Moore was then named head coach in January 2024 when Jim Harbaugh left to return to the NFL. Moore's short head coaching tenure ends with a 17-8 overall record. With more insight on what this means for the Wolverines on the field, Dave Revson is with former Michigan tight end Jake Butt.
Rick, thanks. Really shocking news, joined by Jake Butt, obviously our lead game analyst here at the Big Ten Network, but also former Michigan All-American tight end. So I think before we get into kind of what's next, just your immediate reaction when you heard this news on Wednesday.
Well, it sucks. It stinks. I had a pit in my stomach, still do have a pit in my stomach. And really that's more about just the people that are affected, the family, the young children that are directly affected by this. That's far more important than the game of football. But then also the players. You know, when you're 18 to 22 years old, that's a pivotal, transformational time in your life. And the difference between college and the NFL, I played at both levels, is your college coach has, they have a role of trying to help develop you as a human being as much as a football player, and all of a sudden these players are thrust into an uncertain time that they did not sign up for. So I think about them. In the near term, they got a guy by the name of Biff Poggi, who the university has turned to. There's been a lot of interim head coaches or stand-in head coaches with all the suspensions in recent years. Biff Poggi has been the guy to step in. Loved by the locker room, trusted by the players, trusted by the staff. And I think about his journey, Dave, he's independently wealthy. He didn't choose Michigan for money or for ego. He chose Michigan because he believes Michigan to be a very special place. So he's the perfect guy to communicate to the locker room in a certain time why they should still stay at what I also to believe is a very special place.
So that's the immediate term. You've got a bowl game to prepare for, which is a bowl game I know I'm really looking forward to, taking on Texas. You got two young quarterbacks. Obviously, Arch isn't quite as young as Bryce, but kind of first-year starting quarterbacks going head-to-head, to high-profile guys, to marquee programs. But there's bigger picture stuff going on here, right? I mean, like, let's just kind of talk about once you get past this next week or so, when everyone processes this news, now you got to think about who's going to be the next head coach. You have to think about the time frame. Players have to think about whether they're going to stick around. I mean, there's just a lot going on now. So tell me about the challenge ahead for Ward Manuel as he tries to steady the ship.
So I was part of the transition from Brady Hoke to Jim Harbaugh. And when the university decided to move on from Brady Hoke, Jim Hackett was our interim AD at the time. And immediately he set up meetings with the team and with the locker room. It's an uncertain time for everybody. And what he did that I thought was brilliant was interview us. He asked us how we felt, the type of characteristics and traits that we would be looking for in a head coach, what was important to us about this process. And suddenly, I think the magic in that is we then became invested in this coaching search as much as Jim Hackett was. Ward would be wise, and I would expect him to do the exact same thing. And again, you have a guy in Biff Poggi that is a standing head coach that can act in and back that message up and answer questions to the players. The good thing is for Ward, though, this is a brand that coaches are going to be attracted to. If you're a coach at the college level, you know it's a game of resources at this point. Michigan's resources stand up with the best of them. You have a young, talented core that Michigan already was relying on this season that you'll benefit from as a coach going forward. So the structure and the foundation of the football program of Michigan is in place. Ward is going to have to act quickly. And I'd say this, Sherrone Moore, when this happened, Jim Harbaugh decided to go to the NFL very late. That was far later than this. There was really no coaching search at that point. It was immediately into Sherrone Moore. Now Ward will have an opportunity. Of course, he has to move quickly, an opportunity to do a full search.
And, I mean, we've seen a search that he did on the basketball side work out pretty well, I would say. Obviously, the dismissal of Juwan Howard led to Dusty May, who is arguably the best team in the country going right now. I think the issue there is there was a more conventional time frame to that search than in this one, right? I mean, you're kind of behind the eight ball because, first of all, we've had a ton of high-profile jobs come open. We have seen some schools really struggle to find a replacement. Others have found their next coach in relative short order. But the issue here, to me, is largely a timing issue because of how compressed the calendar is, because you need to try to have a roster for next year, right? You've got the portal window. You've got all of these things that you're going to kind of be up against. So you have to thread a needle here. And I think that's the really challenging part of it, is it's not just selling the job, because I agree with you. The job speaks for itself. It's a fabulous job. It's one of the best jobs in all of college football. You can make an argument in all of football. The issue, though, is can you get the right person now? With the playoff going on, high-profile coaches are involved in that. You have other high-profile coaches who are involved in bowl games. Maybe you have to think a little bit outside the box in terms of who you get. The timing is not ideal, Jake.
No, I mean, and it isn't. And I think, too, you know, you don't want to be rushed. You have to move quickly. But I think the piece of this for Ward is if you can move quickly, all that structure can remain in place. Like, I'm putting myself in the position of the current recruits in the locker room. And the narratives they're reading right now is this is one of the most attractive jobs in football. So I'd imagine the players and the recruits are thinking Ward Manuel's going to go out and get a quality hire. But the longer you wait and the longer we move away from this, the uncertainty will start to build. So it's this little game that Ward's going to have to play to go out there and get the right hire done, do it as quickly as possible to protect the foundation and structure Michigan has in place right now.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating situation. And to your point, there's so much that you need to maintain right now. And so that, to me, is the balancing act. You have to get it right. You can't say we just need to get somebody in this seat, because that's the wrong way to go about it. But to your point, you kind of need to get somebody in that seat sooner rather than later. When
Sherrone was hired, it was Jim Harbaugh, Sherrone. It was just a continuation. For this, the benefit is the way I'm looking at it, Ward is going to turn away 4 or 5 quality coaches. There's going to be more quality coaches that want this job than there is a supply. There's only one head coach in Michigan. If Ward can handle this do it quickly.
Right. I mean, it's just, to me, it's the timing element. It's where these people are right now and whether or not they're in a position to make a move. But again, to your point, I think anyone watching this network's in agreement. It's a really good job. I don't think there's any question about that, Rick.
Purdue got back into Big Ten play and back to its winning ways on Wednesday with an 85-57 win over Minnesota. Game was fairly tight at the half, and Braden Smith and company took over after recess as Purdue outscored Minnesota 50-25 in the second half. No answer on the inside for Trey Kaufman-Renn. This was much needed for Purdue. Remember, last time we saw the Boilermakers, they were getting run out of their own gym as Iowa State did them in by more than 20 at Mackey. Welcome back inside Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Rick Pizzo joined by Andy Katz. I said it's a much-needed bounce back, maybe in terms of wins and losses. This is not a team whose confidence is going to be shaken. They're too veteran. But it was very nice to see Purdue being Purdue again on Wednesday.
Yeah, I was there last night, and what really surprised me in talking to the players and the staff during the practice, during the shoot-around, as we call it, was that there was no Matt Painter peeling the paint off the walls. That might have happened 10, 15 years ago. This is a veteran group. They know they played poorly against Iowa State. It was sort of more of an outlier. Defensively, their best players did not play well. They didn't make shots. They had some shots, they just didn't go down for them. But I didn't get the sense that they, had to do all these suicides, had 3-hour practices, hours and hours of film session after that Iowa State loss. They realized, okay, we didn't play well. That's not the norm here at home. We're better than this. We are a good team. And that's what we saw in the second half. First half, and I think we got to give Minnesota some credit here, they attacked Purdue. They cut very well, which is something that Nico Medved's teams do really well. And it was a 3-point game at the half. And then at halftime, Purdue sort of woke up a little bit more. And Braden Smith really took over defensively.
But to me, that's what happens, right? You have a guy like Braden Smith who's led this team to the highest of highs. He is not going to let the lowest of lows last more than one game.
Right. And, I mean, he showed why he's the reigning Big Ten Player of the Year, a first-team All-American. His leadership, I thought, in that game, certainly in the second half. It was on every possession, especially defensively. He finishes with 5 steals. You know, he 4 rebounds shy of a triple-double, or you could say 5 steals short of that. But he had 15 points, 6 rebounds, 12 assists, and 5 steals. But we just saw in the highlight those 50-50 balls, diving for everything, just getting everyone on the same page. Trey Kaufman-Renn, phenomenal talent, but he doesn't have that same voice that Braden Smith does. And you've got some new pieces there, and so we really saw his leadership on display in this game.
Yeah, I know TKR is more of a player than a leader. Then again, sometimes you can't have 2 guys screaming at the teammates in the huddle, and that's Braden Smith's role. Trey Kaufman-Renn's role and the rest of these bigs is to eat up balls off the glass, and they do that very well. And I think that's another reason why Matt Painter doesn't have to go too deep into his bag of expletives or get into these guys too much, because if it's not Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer on the outside, you can rely on Jacobson and TKR and the rest of the big guys on the inside.
Well, and even their transfer, Oscar Clough, I mean, he's a veteran guy, maybe not within the Purdue program, but certainly he knows what it takes to win games like this, maybe just at a lower level. You know, what's kind of interesting, too, though, is I was surprised to learn this stat that Purdue, under Matt Painter, since 2017, when the Big Ten started these December games.
All right, I'm writing this down.
Okay. This is only the 3rd time they've started 2-0.
I am surprised by that.
They've won the league 3 times.
Well, because remember, there were a few upsets at the hand of Rutgers.
Yep.
Yes.
And so they've, you know, you would assume Purdue's, they've always gotten out to this 2-0 start. So this also was an important game for that. They won at Rutgers a week ago. So now you're 2-0. And in talking to a lot of Big Ten coaches, they know how big a hole it is when you got to climb out of an 0-2 start.
Yes.
And even 1-1, you're a little bit, you know, you're just a hair behind. It hasn't affected Purdue as much, but when you start 2-0, you know you are where you need to be.
Yep.
Because when you restart the league in a couple of weeks, you're.
And listen, I know the margin of victory was kind of like a boom for Purdue because you lose by 23 to Iowa State. Iowa State's a really good team. We're going to talk about the Cyclones in a little bit because they play Iowa on Thursday night. But before we leave this game, you said you want to give some credit to Minnesota in the first half. Overall, I think this is a team, we saw it obviously against Indiana. This is a team that can scare some teams inside the Big Ten this year, even though person to person, they're probably not going to match up talent-wise with the teams at the top, like Purdue, like Michigan State, like maybe Nebraska, part of that conversation now.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is they're down to like essentially 7 high-level players because of injuries. So Nico Medved and his staff are doing a great job sort of manufacturing possessions, points. That second half against Indiana was incredibly impressive. The barn was about 3/4 full.
Yep.
If it can be completely full, you know, then they've got a real
and you
shot.
win, the animals show up.
Yeah, it's a great environment. Now they have a couple of bye games before they jump back into the Big Ten season. Are they an NCAA tournament team? I don't think so. Are they a postseason team? I think they could be, which would be a nice leap forward for Nico Medved.
In year one, you
Yes.
get those extra games, you get
Yes.
that extra prep for what he hopes is a more successful year two. Now, I just mentioned Nebraska because Nebraska, one of, I believe, just 4 teams left still in all of major college basketball. Eight teams that are undefeated.
2 in the Big Ten.
2 in the Big Ten. 90-60. Now, Wisconsin had an early lead, and then it went away very quickly. Andy, I asked you before we came on air if you or anybody else saw this coming. We knew that Nebraska would be better with Rink masked back and healthy, but they lose Connor Essegian for this season at the beginning of the year, and we were wondering, is this Nebraska team going to be NCAA tournament quality? Tournament quality. I mean, right now they look like one of the best teams in the country.
So I get a lot of flack for my power rankings, and that's fine. One thing I did. What's that?
Is it fine?
Yeah, whatever. I'll take it. One thing I did in the preseason is I had Nebraska in the lowest tier in a group of teams of TBD. I didn't know because I just didn't know how good they could be. I wasn't relegating them to the bottom of the Big Ten.
You're making a lot of excuses right now.
I didn't know. I don't think a lot of people knew outside of that locker room how good they could be. And first of all, Rink Mass didn't play it all last year.
Right.
So we got to see how does he come back from that injury. He's been an all Big Ten player. Their transfer of Price Sanford, a great pickup, okay, from Iowa, a guy that they recruited out of high school. So now you've got another experienced Big Ten player. The fact they get Jamarcus Lawrence back He leaves to go to URI, comes back to Nebraska, so he understands this
Seems
culture,
like he's been in college for like 9 years.
And how about Sam Hoiberg?
Yeah, he's a glue guy. He's the ultimate glue guy.
To me, if you're going to play for your father, you're either the best player or you're the guy at the end of the bench who's just waving the towel, or third choice, you are the ultimate hustle player that sets an example for the rest of your squad. He does that. He makes timely shots. And so this group, they've got experience. They're older. And I think more than anything, it's what they've done defensively. 60 points
60
for
points allowed, yeah.
John Blackwell goes 1 for 11. I mean, they are locking teams up. Nebraska under Fred Hoiberg, who obviously was a great shooter, great offensive player, they haven't always been the best defensive teams. This may be their best defensive team under Fred Hoiberg.
It's amazing. They're off to a 10-0 start. They haven't done that since the 77-78 season. Andy was still covering college basketball back then, by the way. But I love the point on defense because you look at the score and you go, wow, Nebraska scored 90. I think Nebraska can score 90 a lot this year. The fact that they held Wisconsin to 60, to me, is a lot more telling, not just about how good this team is, but what this team believes will take it to the level where it wants to be.
You know, we mentioned Purdue losing some of these December games. One of those games, I'm losing track of which year was at Nebraska. You know, if Nebraska continues to play like this, not just in the Big Ten, but I think nationally, it is one of the more underrated home courts.
Oh, it's not underrated anymore, I don't think. PBA?
You think nationally?
I think nationally people now understand how hard it is to play there and to win there.
Yes. So if they're winning, that could be, right off the bat, one of the hardest road swings in the league.
Well, because you just brought up Minnesota and the barn, and you hope that they get, that barnyard and all the animals show up and they get 100% full. That's one thing we can say about Nebraska.
Yes, they show up.
If they're even close to being average or slightly above average, that place is going to be sold out every single night. I think Fred Hoiberg has just done an amazing job. And not just this year, Andy. Like, he set out, he had a vision, right, of what this program could be when he went back. There were people scratching their heads. A guy who coached in the NBA wants to go back and coach Nebraska, who had that one really good year under Tim Miles and then was kind of muddled in mediocrity.
Go back to the Danny Nee era?
I'm not going all the way back to Danny Nee, just to Tim Miles. But I think there were questions. Why did Fred want this job? Because he had a vision, and this vision is now playing itself out.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was that one year in Nebraska, if you remember, Nebraska and Penn State, I think were 4th or 5th in the league, the year, or maybe 5th and 6th. The league only got 4 teams. We're way past that. I mean, obviously, we're going to get somewhere between 10, 12, maybe 13 teams, I think, potentially. It's a little early for that. But Nebraska has now become a program that you can count on to be in the mix. And this year, I think they're going to be above the line. They easily could be in contention for, a top 5 or 6 finish. If we're to assume that Purdue and the 2 Michigans in some order and Illinois are your top 4, not locked in stone, but let's say that's
right now they clearly are.
Nebraska could be 5th.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they be? They certainly could be.
And I think Wisconsin, despite this loss, could be part of that conversation. You can't expect, before this game, John Blackwell was regularly going for 25, 30. You can't expect that every single night. I think Greg Gard really expected a huge breakout year from Nolan Winter this year, and then everybody else was kind of a, to use your term, TBD. And are they in that group right now for you?
They are, but they're inconsistent in some of their high-profile games. I mean, what happened in San Diego? They blow out Providence and they lose to TCU. They've sort of done this stop-start. They had the great win over Marquette. Now Marquette's down, but you got to win the game like that. They've got a game coming up against Villanova in Milwaukee. We just saw Michigan destroy Villanova. That's the kind of game you've got to win. You can't lose those games to teams that are perceived to be below you. But I do think Wisconsin's in that group. I also would not dismiss UCLA, in that sort of second tier that has a chance to move up.
Welcome back to Big Ten Today and a recap of our top story. Now, former Michigan head football coach Sherrone Moore was taken into custody Wednesday night as part of a Pittsfield Township police investigation. Moore had been terminated with cause earlier in the day Wednesday, as a university investigation found that Moore had engaged in inappropriate conduct with another staff member. A statement released by athletic director Ward Manuel reads, in part, quote, "This conduct constitutes a clear violation of university policy, and UM maintains zero tolerance for such behavior." Biff Poggi has been named interim coach as the Wolverines now look ahead to their Citrus Bowl matchup with Texas. Critical timing for next year then begins with the 2-week opening of the transfer portal window beginning on January 2nd. One additional element that could affect Michigan is the ability for current players to also transfer through an additional window, which opens after the hiring of a new permanent head coach. For more insight into everything going on in Ann Arbor, welcome in Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports. Bruce, let's start with the here and now. Over the next couple of days, what are the immediate actions the Michigan Athletic Department and the football program will likely take?
Rick, I think one of the first things they really have to do is try to establish some sense of normalcy, to be honest, because as you know, the events as they were getting relayed both yesterday and last night felt very surreal and stunning, to be honest. I think if you're kind of plugged into on Michigan stuff, you'd heard some rumors bubbling around over the last couple of weeks, and maybe even more than that. But then to actually see it, and then to hear some of the things you're hearing, and now for Sherrone Moore, the former head coach, to be detained and in custody, it's stunning. And I think you got to remember there's a lot of players who are part of this Michigan family now, and they have to be looking at, okay, where do we go from here? As you mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that is happening in addition to playing Texas in a couple of weeks. I think they have Biff Poggi. They're fortunate that he's there because he was really Jim Harbaugh's right-hand man when Harbaugh turned around the Wolverine program a few years ago. And he came back last year, and he obviously was the interim head coach. There was a couple of games where Sherrone had served that NCAA suspension, and Poggi, everybody loves him there, and he's very well respected. And I think him being able to kind of try, as best he can, try to stabilize what's going forward, I think that's a big key piece for Michigan, because right now, in terms of the players and the people in the program, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming at them. And I think that's the part where Michigan has to try to do the best they can to keep what they have going forward, because right now it feels really unstable there.
I think the point about Biff, Bruce, is really important. He is a guy who these players absolutely love, and they respect him. And so I was asked by many, will Michigan players now opt out of the bowl game? I think many will play if Biff asks them to stay and to play. That being said, I mentioned that additional portal window that opens 5 days after a new permanent head coach is hired at any institution. And then the general portal window is open the first 2 weeks in January. So whether it's Biff or whether it's any other member of the staff, I guess the question then becomes, Bruce, until a permanent head coach is named, what exactly do you tell these players who are most likely going to be at least considering what their other options could be?
I think the biggest thing, the message they can sell to them is, hey, you picked Michigan because it's Michigan, more than it was because it was Sherrone Moore's program. And I think that, above all else, is what they hope can keep a lot of these guys there. There's obviously a ton of resources. You know, I think the Biff piece of this is really significant because you got to, for people who don't know who he is, I mean, he was a legendary high school coach in Baltimore who ended up making a fortune also, in addition, in the business world. And Harbaugh hired him. I mean, everybody who's been around him around there reveres him. I think he gives them a chance to have some continuity there. But again, there's going to be all sorts of things coming at the players now. A lot of these guys, if you look at it, it's like, okay, they're going to be asking, what is the plan for me going forward? You know, you have a 5-star quarterback that they signed, Bryce Underwood. The offense was very underwhelming. I think it's, you know, whether it's going to be Biff Poggi going forward or whether they're going to be able to land a Kalen DeBoer or a Jed Fish. I think there's players are going to go, how is this going to benefit me? How am I going to fit in this system? I think on the offensive side is the wild card here of this more than anything else. Michigan's almost always played good defense. They've always been about physicality and those things. I don't think that whoever's the head coach is going to change. I think it's the offensive element here. Again, whoever's going to be the head coach going forward after January 1st, I think it's going to be, okay, what are we doing on offense? Because right now I think it's hard to say, okay, the last couple of years has not been good enough. And I think that that's something that, quite honestly, even if this didn't come out about Sherrone Moore, this week. I think there were a lot of concerns about some of the hires he made and some of, what he was doing on offense and different things that just kind of, I think, left a lot of people scratching their heads.
Bruce, I do want to clarify one thing. Biff Poggi actually served as interim head coach earlier this year when Sherrone Moore was suspended for a completely unrelated incident. And he was asked, Biff Poggi was asked if he ever desired to be a head coach again, had been a head coach recently at Charlotte. He said, no, I want to be a grandfather. I'm happy to help Sherrone, happy to help and be with this program, but I don't want to be a head coach. So that is the obvious lead to the next question. Who will be the permanent head coach? You just threw out two names that are already being discussed in Alabama's Kalen DeBoer and Washington's Jedd Fisch. Are those the first two names that come to mind, and are there any others that you think will be bandied about in the next couple of days?
Yeah, I think in Kalen DeBoer's case, he was not a candidate at Penn State from the sources close to him that I've talked to. Never was, and there was never any contact there. I think if they lose, this being Alabama, they have a game next weekend at Oklahoma, sputtered down the stretch, got into the playoffs still. I think if they lose that game, I would not be surprised if Michigan came to him and said, hey, we'd love to have you here, if he wouldn't give it serious consideration. Because at that point, if it would be two disappointing seasons by Alabama fan standards, I don't know if you want to be entering 2026 kind of on a hot seat of sorts. Even if the AD is telling you, yeah, you're our guy, I think that pressure, that could change again if you have an early exit from the playoff. As far as Jedd Fisch, he's a former offensive coordinator or was a former offensive assistant with Jim Harbaugh and had a role in the play calling back then, has risen up the ranks, did an amazing job taking over a really bad situation at Arizona, and then left after 3 years and is now at Washington and has built that program. The last 2 years they got better. Really good offensive coach. I would not be surprised if Jedd Fisch gets a lot of consideration from this search going forward. Again, he knows the program well. I think he made some good connections there inside the Michigan family, and he's a really good coach and he's really smart. I could definitely see that. Beyond that, I don't know how many other guys that you could, there's been so many searches that have played out, whether it was Penn State or LSU, Florida, and a lot of guys re-upped on deals that I think would have been considered. If Matt Campbell didn't get the Penn State job, I think Matt Campbell would have been a strong candidate for this job. But Penn State already hired him. So and again, so circle back to Biff, I get why he said what he said back then. And I think, that was true. I think if he felt like, what, this program needs me and this would be the only place I'd want to be a head coach, I think he would have a hard time turning it down, because I know the affinity he has for the University of Michigan and also for a lot of people inside that program. Again, I'm not saying that he would be lobbying for this job, but I think he would be somebody that would have a hard time saying no if they said, we want you to be the head coach.
Bruce, had about 1 minute. I just want to finish with this kind of more of a statement that I think we both agree upon. Even after Jim Harbaugh's departure, which came under strange terms, obviously headed back to the NFL and all the conversation about the Connor Stallions and the sign stealing, and now this situation with Sherrone Moore and kind of the soap opera that has been this program over the last couple of years, make no bones about it, right? You base it on facilities, you base it on history, you base it on expectations. Bruce, this clearly remains one of the best jobs in all of college football.
No doubt. I mean, look, it is the bluest of blue bloods. You can sell, great facilities, amazing history, top-notch history, as good as it gets. They just won a national title a couple of years ago by basically being Michigan, by doing it that way, by being physical and all the things that, the principles of what Bo Schembechler and a lot of coaches, honestly, before him have kind of put the foundation for. There's a lot of young talent, and I think that's attractive to, they haven't been that good on offense, but some of the most talented guys in the program are really young players, and I think that will be really appealing, too, for a lot of coaches.
Great insight on this still developing story from Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports. Bruce, as always, appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rick.
Well, Bruce mentioned Michigan was just shy of getting into this CFP bracket. It's a bracket now set in stone for at least the next week or so. Playoff kicks off Friday the 19th. The following night in Eugene, Oregon opens its CFP schedule against 12-seed James Madison and head coach Bob Chesney, who will then head to UCLA as the Bruins head coach once JMU's season comes to a close. Take a look at the Gatorade Big Stat, and much like his predecessor at JMU, Curt Cignetti, Chesney worked his way up the college coaching ladder, doing nothing but win at every stop. In fact, Chesney won Coach of the Year honors at the Division III, II, FCS, and FBS levels, and will soon be trying to work that same magic in Westwood. After Tuesday night's blowout of Villanova, Michigan has now won 6 straight games by at least 25 points, 2 of those wins coming over ranked opponents, making these Wolverines the first group to pull off that feat in all of college basketball in at least 30 years. Michigan is winning by 28 points per game. The Wolverines return to Big Ten play coming up Saturday at Maryland. Andy Katz rejoins us with more on the Wolverines. We wondered before the year started, how would Michigan move on? What would the Wolverines look like without Vlad Golden, without Danny Wolf, and the 2 big 7-footers? They get a Daimar to come from UCLA. Yaxa Lendenborg has been everything and then some as advertised. And to me right now, Michigan is clearly the best team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason Arizona is number 1 because they have more ranked wins, and I'm fine with that, and that's actually what I did, snapshot in time. But yes, there's no question that Michigan looks the part of the best team in the country. I mean, the way they're beating teams, I'm going to date myself, but I think you're in the same ballpark here. I mean, this is UNLV-esque.
Oh, Larry Johnson, yes. Stacey Augmon, absolutely.
I mean, they are hurting teams. You know, I mean, they're putting a hurt on these teams where they're intimidating. As you point out, I love that graphic, by the way. Defensively,
I had nothing to do with the actual creation of the graphic. Nice work by our graphics department.
Related to that graphic, since that Wake Forest game where they gave up 84 points, 7 games since then, only 1 team has even scored more than 63. So the way they're locking teams down it's been intimidating, it's been demoralizing. I mean, that game against Gonzaga, the 3rd game in 3 days in Las Vegas, they only score 61. Now, of course, Michigan scores over 100, so they beat them by 40. Even when Auburn scored 72, Michigan scored 102, so they beat them by 30. So it's their defense that's been so impressive. And I go back to the NBA draft combine. I saw Dusty May in Chicago, and Yaxa Lendenborg was there. Mm-hmm. And he was on sort of pins and needles. Is he going to stay in the draft? What's he going to do? Because he had made the announcement that if he does return, he's going to Michigan, transferring from UAB. And then when he withdrew, I remember texting with Dusty, and he was just absolutely thrilled because he knew what he had there. What he didn't know, again, 2nd year in a row, is how do the pieces fit?
Well, then you add Merez Johnson from Illinois. That has been such a huge piece. It was a guy that I think when we watched him in Champaign, we thought, man, if this guy had a bigger role, think about the things he could do. Well, now he has that role.
But also, I think on the perimeter, you bring in Elliot Cadeau,
who's been great.
But how is he going to fit? We didn't know with Roddy Gale, with Namari Burnett. You know, so how are all those guards and Kason? You know, how are all those guys going to fit together? They've all bought in.
Well, and credit right to the coaching staff to make sure that nobody gets mad that Roddy Gale or Namari Burnett are not mad that they're giving up minutes that they thought would be theirs before Cadeau came in. That's credit to the coaching staff right there. And listen, I think everybody believed we have ideas about hires. It's a home run hire.
Yes.
It's a great fit. I don't think that anybody that knows basketball believed anything other than Dusty May in Ann Arbor was going to be a perfect fit.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't take Florida Atlantic to the Final Four and be a fluke. Because first of all, they had to be good teams to get there. It wasn't like they just, the bracket just completely opened up for them. Florida Atlantic had to be good teams to get to the Final Four with a team. And look where those players went. I mean, one of them is on Wisconsin now, Nick Boyd. Elijah Martin won a national championship with Florida last year. So these guys have all moved around and had success in their second go-round. And so he obviously knew how to evaluate talent. He could fit different personalities together. And it's worked brilliantly thus far through this early part of the season. We'll see how it goes when they have to go to Purdue on February 17th. They got 2 games against Michigan State. They got Illinois. I mean, we just know the Big Ten road is different. Can they run the table?
No, nobody's going to run the table.
Yeah. I mean, there's, by the way, the 50th anniversary of the last team to do it.
Nobody's going to run the table.
From this league, the 76 Hoosiers. But we know how hard that is. But they've got 9 starters, and they all believe that they have a starting role, even though they're not actually starting the game.
Michigan, one of the great stories, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. Another great story, though, out west. Even though USC gave up a huge late lead and lost a Big Ten conference game over the weekend to Washington, came back, beat San Diego. Chad Baker-Mazara has been absolutely phenomenal for Eric Musselman. This team is off to a 9-1 start. They were in the top 25 before that loss to Washington. Potentially will get back in. To me, this is a team, look, Michigan had expectations. I think when all these guys came in, we thought they'd be a top 25, maybe a top 10 team. Maybe we didn't think they'd be as good as they are now. I don't really think that anybody outside of Muss and this locker room had a ton of expectations for USC coming into the year.
And that's fair. Now, Rodney Rice is hurt. We don't know the extent of his shoulder injury.
And they lost 2 really important guys in the portal to another Big Ten school.
Yes, and there was a lot of tension over that. And then Washington goes down and beats them. Rodney Rice has the shoulder injury that happens in Maui. I was out there with them. Hopefully it's not, season long. He's missed, I think 4 games now. But Chad Baker-Mazara has sort of picked up even more of the slack. But also what they've gotten inside from Ezra Alsar, he's been phenomenal as an anchor inside. Jacob Coffey, another post player for them. Jaden Brownwell, who transferred from Samford, good shooter. He's added. And then one of the X factors for them will be Terrence Williams. Remember him? He played at Michigan. He breaks his hand at USC, so he's not able to reach his full potential. But with Rice out, if Williams can contribute and complement Chad Baker-Mazara as well as Jordan Marsh, who hit that crazy shot to beat Troy in triple overtime, so they've got all these pieces. Now they do have a tough opening to the Big Ten. By the way, Eric Musselman's request. They're playing a 3-game road trip because he wanted to have last year they had like a one-off at Nebraska. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to have a 3-game road trip, and the 3rd game is at Minnesota, which is going to be a very emotional game for him, returning where his late father was the head coach, where he grew up. But they go at Michigan State, at Minnesota the first week of January. We're going to learn a lot about this USC team on that trip.
Baker-Mazara is a name that I don't think a lot of folks inside the Big Ten knew anything about before this year. And Andy, he is just a walking bucket.
He's going to be 26 in January. So he's been around the game for quite some time. Look, he's just got some moxie to him. He's a little quirky. There was times out in Maui where he sort of disappeared, not literally, but sort of during the game. He was on the bench for a while. Then he decided, I'm going to come out and just score 20. By the way, the other name that's just floating out there, Elijah Arenas. Big-time recruit, Gilbert Arenas' son. He got hurt.
Injured in the offseason.
He had a car accident, which thankfully did not cause him an injury, but then he did hurt his knee, and that's what's kept him out. And Eric Musselman said he thinks he will play in January.
Wow.
So if you add Elijah Arenas, who's one of the best high school players in the country,
stacked roster,
that's going to really help them.
All right, don't forget, we have a Big Ten Network, Andy's favorite, quadruple header coming up on Saturday. Michigan State and Penn State tip things off at noon Eastern. That's followed by non-conference clashes for Northwestern, Oregon, and Washington. Our coverage begins at 11:30 a.m. Eastern with the tip-off show. And so Washington will play in the 4th and final game of that quadruple header. That amazing comeback against USC. They were down 18 at the half. They found a way. Certainly probably emotional for Des Claude and Wesley Yates, who came from USC. But Danny Sprinkle also has an international player, a German in Hannes Steinbach, who has put up crazy numbers this past week. He is a double-double machine.
And remember, he missed 3 games, including their loss to Colorado on a neutral court. Look, in a year where we have a historic freshman class across the country, Steinbach is not getting the love he deserves because of Cameron Boozer, AJ DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, Caleb Wilson, Mikael Brown, all these great freshmen that are going to be in the NBA draft. Well, so is Steinbach.
He 24 and 16 in that comeback win over USC.
He's going to be one and done. Let's just say it right now. But he has a chance, I still think, to play in the NCAA tournament because this team is not healthy even yet. Bryson Tucker, a transfer from Indiana. He's a bucket getter. Danny Sprinkle hopes that he will be back here soon, maybe even this week. So they have not had their full roster for one game this whole season. Frank Kepnang, who was a transfer from Oregon, wasn't healthy last season. Now he's back. When this roster is whole, Desmond Claude, by the way, also missed games. He was really good in that USC game. So when the roster is whole, this is a team that I think could finish. We talked earlier in the show of that middle group that was Nebraska, UCLA, and Wisconsin. I would add USC in there, and I would add Washington if they can stay healthy. They're going to continue to move up.
It is just amazing. Steinbach's the latest in a line of European ready-made freshmen, guys that come over like KJ last year at Illinois, and you're not just playing a role, you're the best player on the team, and obviously it says something about the difference in the way that the internationals are playing at 17 and 18 versus high school.
Yeah, one NCAA rule that was changed within the last couple of years that I think was a great move was they used to be so archaic in if you played in a professional game in Europe, you could not play or you had to sit games. It was really draconian in that sense. They've loosened that entirely. All these guys have played professionally in some form in Europe that have come over. Last night, Omar Meyer from Purdue, he played sort of a lower level with Maccabi Tel Aviv. So that's just their system. Even if you're not playing in the elite, you're within their program and you are getting professional games. You may be on their B team or what have you. And you come over here and you've got experience. You're maybe a year or two older, and there's no question it has helped the game and it's helping the Big Ten.
Archaic, draconian. Andy's been playing the advanced version of Scrabble before the show. NCAA Women's Volleyball Sweet 16 is serving up a pair of matches featuring Big Ten teams on Thursday night. Minnesota takes on number 1 seed and regional host Pitt at 7 Eastern. That match followed by Purdue and SMU on the same floor. Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Indiana will play their Sweet 16 matches on Friday. Only one Big Ten men's basketball game Thursday night, but it doesn't get any bigger for the state of Iowa. Ben McCollum's first taste of the Cy-Hawk rivalry as Iowa head coach will be a huge ask as McCollum leads the Hawkeyes to Hilton for a road matchup against a 4th-ranked Iowa State team coming off that 23-point weekend win over then top-ranked Purdue. Andy, what a way to get the Cy-Hawks started if you're Ben McCollum. Listen, Iowa's been really good. Trouble is, Iowa State's been one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, I was texting with Ben McCollum about how do you handle them, and they said we've got to handle their physicality. Iowa State sort of can bully you. They certainly offensively played great against Purdue. Milan Momcilovic, was knocking down threes all over the place. Joshua Jefferson, Taman Lipsey. There's a lot of quality guards that are going to give Bennett Sturts some fits. I mean, this is going to be a great test for Sturts. How does he handle the physicality defensively? Can he get his shot off? It didn't go so well when Iowa went to East Lansing, and they were a little physical with them in that Big Ten opener. So tough road assignment for Iowa, but I still like Iowa. Probably, we've been tearing up this league. Tearing as in T-I-E-R.
Yes.
I think Iowa's in sort of the back end of that middle group that we discussed.
So you just mentioned Bennett Sturts. I mean, he's a guy who is going to be asked to do a lot, if not everything, for this team. Ben McCollum doesn't take him off the floor. Sturts says he wants to play 39, 40 minutes a game. Can you get away with doing that against a team like Iowa State, who as you pointed out, all sorts of elbows and shoulders into the back of Sturts on every possession? Well,
it's going to be a real tough assignment for him. But look, he's a great shooter. It has worked at Northwest Missouri. It worked at Drake. And now it's working at Iowa.
It is Iowa State. It comes your way tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 local time. I love the Cy-Hawk. It's a great rivalry. It is one of the underrated rivalries in all of college sport, and a terrific women's game. Audie Crooks from Iowa State did in the Hawkeyes, but Jan Jensen's team had a great chance to win that one as well. We hope the men's game is that good as well. For everybody here involved in this edition of Big Ten Today, including Dave Revson, Jake Button, of course, my main man, Andy Katz, I'm Rick Pizzo. As always, we appreciate you hanging with us here on the Big Ten Network. Have a good one.